right? Faith in God is deliberate. Faith in God is intentional. Faith in God is not just circumstantial. A lot of the times, people live by circumstantial faith, which is that they have faith for a circumstance, they have faith for a situation, they have faith for a season, they have faith for something. Okay? But the faith that we're speaking about here is not faith that you try and produce in a situation or a circumstance, but faith that the Bible says that you live by. The Bible says that the just shall live by faith. And that faith in God is a matter of progression that is going from one level of experience or encounter with God to another level of encounter. Now, that concept of faith is tied in to different stages of maturity in God. So, as an example, I don't know if I said this here last week or it was in London that I said it, that there are certain things that you don't now struggle to do because of your maturity, humanly speaking. So, for example, when you were a baby, there were certain things you couldn't do. One of them was that you could not walk by yourself. You could not just run around. And when you started walking, you wanted to take gradual steps, and you had to think of what you wanted to do. And you were in a sense, kind of careful how you did what you did, basically, when you were a baby. But now, this morning, you didn't get up out of your bed thinking, I need to calculate how many steps it would take me from getting to my bed to the shower. It became very natural to you. Does that make sense? Yeah. So in the same way, a lot of things that we make into a project in our lives, in our walk with God, basically, I believe that these things they are functions or they are products of our maturity in God. So we can never look at faith without looking at the issue of spiritual maturity and growth. And as a result, we cannot look at faith without looking at sonship. And in the book of Galatians, Paul says, I am crucified with Christ, Galatians 2:20. Nevertheless, I live, yet not I, but Christ lives in me. And he says, the life that I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself. So Paul was conscious about his life, how he lived, and how this life that he lived was based on the faith that he had in the Son of God, specifically the Son of God. So I want us to look at how sonship impacts faith. And again, I'm going to do this. I want us to turn to the book of Ephesians, chapter 4. And I'll be sharing with us some things tonight and go and come and build on it. Ephesians chapter 4. Thank you, Holy Spirit. Thank you, Lord Jesus. Now, if we look at verse 12, okay, if we look at verse 11 so we can make some more sense of it. Verse 11. He says, and he gave some apostles and some prophets and some evangelists and some pastors and some teachers for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ, till we all come in the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, unto a perfect man, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. I remember sharing with you on this, and I was talking about how it's important to know that the focus of your growth is to become like Christ. And then he says that we henceforth be no more children, tossed to and fro and carried around by every wind of doctrine, by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness, whereby they lie in wait to deceive. But speaking the truth in love may grow up into him in all things, which is the head, even Christ. I want to go back to 14. It says that we henceforth be no more children, tossed to and fro, and carried about with every wind of doctrine, by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness, whereby they lie way to deceive. The Apostle Paul spots something so important here. And what he spots is that whenever we remain children, spiritually speaking, we are prone to something, and we are prone to being tossed to and fro. We are prone to being unstable. We are prone to instability. We are prone to being moved. He says we're prone to deception. We're prone to being conned. Does that make sense? We are prone to so many things. And so Paul comes in here and he shows us the purpose of the ministry gift that Jesus gave to the church. And he said that this ministry gift, apostles, prophets, pastors, teachers, evangelists, they have a goal, which is to equip the saints so that the saints will eventually arrive at what he calls mature manhood. And mature manhood meaning that essentially we would arrive into the measure and the stature of Christ's fullness. The measure and the stature of Christ's fullness. And that's so powerful. So he says that we know that we should no longer be babes or children, tossed to and fro. Tossed to and fro. Now, what is so powerful about this? If we turn to Romans chapter 8, Romans chapter 8. Romans 8. And so if we look at it from verse 14. Romans 8:14. He says that for as many as are led by the Spirit of God, they are the sons of God. For you have not received the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you have received the spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself, I don't know where they got it from, the Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. Now, there's something so remarkable here that we need to pay attention to. Paul says, he says that as many as are led by the Spirit of God, they are the sons of God. Now, but he also says that the Spirit bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. Now, these are the things that we need to be very careful about, because the words that are used here to connote sons and children are different words. The word that is used for son there, it is the word yos or hios. That will not by English, right? It's the word hios. But the word for children in scriptures was not always hios. Okay, so he says here that as many as are led by the Spirit of God, they are the hios of God. The hios of God. But then he says that the Spirit bears witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. I will come back to that. Now, interchangeably in Scripture, there are a few words that are used to connote son in Scripture. Right? The first one is the word nepios. Okay, so because of the Greek, I'll do this. Alright, is the word nepios. That's one word that is used to connote child, children, or son in scriptures. The next one is the word, okay, the word paideon. The word paideon. That's the next one. Then the next one is the word technon. And these are all Greek words. And the next word is the word neaniskos. Neaniskos. Okay? And then the last one is the word yos. Okay? So these are the 5 main words that whenever in scriptures they would say either son or child or children. These are the words that were often used to describe these aspects of sonship. Now, it's important. This is so important because at different stages of the writings of the apostles in speaking about sonship and maturity, they would interchange with these scriptures. And so in 1 John, when John is writing to the church, John begins to say, I write to you children, I write to you little children. Okay, he goes on to say, I write to you young men. So you see in the epistle of John to the church where he uses some of these interchangeably. You see in Paul's writings where he begins to make reference to these different stages. He makes reference to Nepios describing the Corinthian church in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, where he says that you are yet carnal, and you are babes, and you are carnal. Basically, he makes reference to that, regardless of who you think wrote Hebrews. So most people would reckon Paul. Again, he says in another place in the book of Hebrews, he says that when you have when you're supposed to be teaching, when you're supposed to be teachers, you have need for people to teach you the elementary principles of Christ. He says when you ought to be teachers, right, you are still babes and you have need for someone to teach you the elementary principles of Christ. So these 5 stages of sonship, Nepios, Paideia, Teknon, Neaniskos, and Hios. These 5 stages, very important. Why are they very important? Because, why are they very important? They're important because, please can you come and settle down, please? Yeah. Okay. They're important because it allows us to see the way that the Lord is very systematic in our growth and the way that He brings us from faith to faith. David, can you sit down? Okay. How the Lord is very systematic and He brings us from one level of faith to another level of faith. So every Christian that comes into Christ is born Nepios. What does the word Nepios mean? The word Nepios simply means newborn, simply means infant, one that has been born newly. Interestingly, it is the word that you get the word nappy from. So there are times in Scripture where there is a reference to the children of God and they are being referred to as Nepios. And a believer who is Nepios is a newborn believer who is at the very first stage of their salvation, essentially a baby in the Spirit. They are a child of God, quite all right, that's true, but they're a child of God who have not formed certain realities of God's kingdom. And it's important that every believer has the opportunity to begin from the place of Nepios. The reason is simple. The reason is that every time you force growth and you are not progressive in the way God wants you to be progressive, eventually it causes a problem for you. A Nepios is a spiritual dependent. A Nepios is dependent just as a baby is dependent, there's a time for every believer to be dependent. You know, we have to check in on you. Don't do this. Don't do that. Be on time. Come here. You know, there's a time. That's allowed, right? There's a time for that in the life of every believer. Have you prayed today? Make sure you pray. Okay. Are you fasting? Make sure you fast. There's a time for that. Okay. Now, the problem here is not that. The problem here is not that God hasn't ordained for us to pass through nepios. No, God knows that that's a natural state of growth, whether naturally speaking or spiritually speaking. The problem is when you stay in nepios when you're supposed to be passing through. That's the problem. And so, in 1 Corinthians 3, Paul is addressing the church, and he's saying that you are yet carnal, and your babes, your nepios, simply because you have strife and envy amongst you. They were still carnal people. They were supposed to have left the nepios stage of Christianity. What happens at the nepios stage of Christianity? You're a Christian, but you still have carnal tendencies. Right? You're a Christian, but we still need to get the carnal perspective of the word, of the world rather, out of you. Nepios, the Bible says, is unskilled in the word of righteousness. Right? He's unskilled in the word of righteousness. You're still being taught at nepios level as a Christian how to use the word, basically. So every time you face a challenge, you need counseling. You need prayer. Because you don't know how to use the word to fight for yourself. Now that makes you think, wow, there's a lot of nepios international churches. Right? Churches where everything's pastor. That's a nepios mindset. So you move from that nepios, and then you move to the next stage, pardon. And this stage, usually between the age of 3 and 12. In those days, usually between the age of 3 and 12. And at Pardon, you are now coming into the awareness of relationship with the Father. As nepios, you have some type of cognizance of your parents. A baby is able to identify, okay, this is my dad, this is my mom, but he's not able to relate deeply. He's not able to relate deeply. But as that baby grows, the baby is able to begin to value the depth and the importance of parenthood. The same in the spirit. When you move from nepios to pardon, right? When you move from nepios to pardon, now you're beginning to know the Father. In 1 John chapter 2 verse 13. 1 John 2:13. 1 John 2:13. John says, I write to you, fathers, because you have known him who is from the beginning. I write to you, young men, because you have overcome the wicked one. I write to you, little children, because you have known the Father. Right? I write to you, little children, because you have known the Father. And so here he's addressing pardon. You see the difference? It's so important that for you to be able to make out the depth of the revelation, that you understand the terminology he's using there. You can just think, oh, he's writing to children. Now, if you take that generically, you could have a problem. You could go, was it children's church in that church? So you need to know the terms he's using. So here, he's saying, I write to you, pardon. Okay? I write to you, children, different from nepios, because now you're coming to the place where you're now beginning to develop a bond of fellowship with the Father. That is one positive side of pardon. But also at pardon, you need to be careful. Because at pardon, you can now begin to develop your own ways. At pardon. Right? you can begin to think that maybe, there's a level of independence that you want at Pioneer. But the powerful thing about Pioneer is that this is the place, this is the level where your fellowship with the Father should grow so much at this level. Now, the next stage is Technon. Right, the next stage is Technon, and this is so key. So in Epios, I am born again, but I'm a babe. I'm born again, but I'm immature, so I can have spiritual tantrums. Right? But I grow into Paideon. In Paideon, my awareness of fellowship with the Father begins to grow. Now then I come to Technon. And what happens in Technon? In Technon, now Technon is so interesting because Technon is often used with similarities of a relationship between a mentor and a mentee, a teacher and a student. So, for example, a teacher could call his student son, Technon. Does that make sense? He could refer to his student as a son, Technon, because of the relationship that they have. But now this is also key with Technon. Now, Technon was around the age of 13. And you had this thing called, in the Jewish culture, it's called Bat Mitzvah. That's the best way to pronounce it. Now, this Bat Mitzvah, it was a time in the Jewish culture, around the age of 13, where, and it's quite a big celebration, where a child is now recognized as a man at the age of 13. Right? And in being recognized as a man, what would happen is that he is now enlisted to his father's business. He's now enlisted, not that he begins to run the business, but his name is enlisted. And it is the age of apprenticeship. He becomes an apprentice of his father's business. Now, we see something interesting in the life of Jesus. Was it around that age that he went and he said, I need to be about my father's business? Okay, so you begin to learn these things. Now, so you come to Technon, and in Technon, what's happened here is that you're now beginning to have an awareness of what the business of the Father is. You're an apprentice. You're not ready to take over the world like that, because here's the problem that we have. Everyone was like, yeah, we want to go in and change the systems and change. I love that conversation. But there's a process to it. So at Technon, you're an apprentice. So you don't say at Technon that you're a son, because some Christians say they're sons of God, but they're Technon to nobody. So are they really sons? Because for you to say you're Technon, essentially, you subscribe to some sort of developmental relationship, some sort of mentoring relationship, some sort of apprenticeship. Are we still here? Yeah. Okay. So I want you to really, really get this in your heart. And so, out of this Technon, you begin to grow, and the Technon in the natural progression could stretch from that age of 13 right up until the age of between 25 to 30. So you grow, and in that process, that's when you now come into Neaniskos, which is just a stage in that period. And Neaniskos is it just means young man. And so you find John writing to the church in 1 John, and he says, I write to you young men because what? You're strong, and the word of God abides in you. He's talking to Neaniskos. See, the stages are important. He says, I write to you Neaniskos because you're strong at the word of God. Because when you've been cultivating as a technon, of course you're also becoming a Neaniskos. And let me know, okay. So if you're cultivating as an apprentice, you're also growing up as a young man. And at this stage of being Neaniskos, you have definitely a level of maturity to you. Right? The word of God abides in you. It's so strong in you. But there's a challenge. The same John says to the young men, he says, do not love the world and all that is in the world. Lust of the eyes, pride of life, lust of the flesh. Why did he say that? He said that because at the stage of Neaniskos, now you're beginning to understand, because you've been technon, you've been an apprentice. You're now beginning to understand what business is. The business of your father. Okay. So you're beginning to understand the business of your father is. You're beginning to grow in that understanding. But you have a challenge. Your challenge could be that now you understand the authority, you understand your power, you understand your influence, but you may want to not use it for the most important things. So, for example, you have some Neaniskos believers who, what they want to do is use their faith to buy private jet and claim this. And then there's nothing wrong with those. All things are permissible, all things beneficial. So their focus would be on things that are not necessarily at that. They're not wrong, but they're not at the highest. Neaniskos, I was discovering on the Neaniskos type believers are like this. They now know the authority. So they say stuff like, if you touch me, you will know where I stand with God. Right? Because they understand authority, they understand power, they understand dominion, they get it. But there is still this thing about them where it's like they need not be distracted, even though they're beginning to get influence and they understand. And at this stage, what happens actually is that the temptation here is just as massive because the enemy now knows that you're beginning to understand influence. So he wants you to substitute influence for your influence or to misuse your influence. Are we together? Then we move to the next phase, which is yours. And this is so powerful. Yours is the one that Romans chapter 8 is talking about. When it says, as many as are led by the Spirit of God, they are the yours of God. When it says that the earnest of creation awaits the manifestation of the yours of God. Not the nepios, not the technon, not the pagan, not the Neaniskos, but the yours of God. Now, what is this thing about yours? Because this is where I'm going. What is this thing about this stage of maturity and how it connects to faith? This your stage, there were three main, in the life of a Jewish child, there were three main ceremonies that he would go through. One was circumcision, right? The other was the bat mitzvah that I spoke about, which is celebrating you coming into that age of, being technon and learning the trade of your father. Okay, so, but the third one is your stagia. Okay, let me try and spell it. Yeah. Something like that.
No.
Something like that.
Your first year.
Yeah.
There's no S.
There's no what?
S.
That's how they spell it in the, well, anyway, they use the Greek training.
No, they didn't spell it that way either. Without S. There was no S.
Without the S,
Yeah.
okay.
But still,
Yeah.
terrible spelling.
Okay. Well, thank God I want to Greek.
No, not you. I mean the people
Yeah.
who made
So, your Tasia, okay. Now, here is what's going on. This is very key. What's going on here is powerful in the sense that, now, after this child has gone through being taken on and being trained, the father now gets to a place where he's satisfied with the training of the son, and he calls the son in the presence of people and announces to the people that he is pleased with his son, and that now his son has the full right to represent him. Now, interestingly, let me read what he would say. He would say, "This is my beloved son, with whom I am well pleased. I bestow upon him now all of my riches and power and authority through the power of attorney, so that he might act on my behalf in all of my affairs." The father will literally say that to his Yoshua, to his technon who has been through training. He will literally say that to him. And at that point, that child that was born Nepios, who, even though when he was born Nepios, he was a heir by virtue of the fact that he was born into the family. The potential that he has becomes a reality at that point. So he would say to him, "This is my beloved son,